Let's bring in the new chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Dick Durbin. And this is obviously, Senator, an issue that hits close to home with you. A lot of Chicago parents up in arms, outraged at what's been happening with the Chicago City schools. What can you tell us not only about what Chicago schools should be doing, but also what the Biden administration should do after it looks like science is fairly clear on this issue? It's safe to send kids back to school.
Well, I'm happy as a father and grandfather, and with some of my grandkids in the Chicago public school system, that they have reached an agreement, and in a matter of days, kids will be back in the classroom. And it's like Willie said at the outset, they have to measure this against the safety issue. They have to listen to the medical experts in terms of the pace of it. We've got to make sure that not only the students are safe, but of course the teachers and administrators. It's an awesome responsibility, but I do not diminish the importance of getting these kids back in school, both for their educational achievement and for their mental well-being. It's time.
And after we have criticized the Trump administration for 8-9 months for not following science, and after Democrats did that regularly for them not following the advice of scientists, should not the CDC also follow the advice of scientists who say that it is critically important to get children back in school?
Yes. We want to follow medical expertise and science over political considerations. I think Joe Biden has said that over and over, and I agree with him. That should be the standard.
Senator, let's talk impeachment. The defense for former President Trump will make its case today. Could be a vote as early as tomorrow after senators' questions. Do you have any sense, after having sat through the last 2 days of House managers' presentation, of whether there are now more Republicans, perhaps, than you anticipated that might vote for conviction? I think the conventional wisdom is that 17 is too high a bar to get conviction, but are there more that have been swayed by what they saw in that chamber over the last 2 days?
Willie, I just don't know. I try to put myself in their shoes and measure what we've just seen. It's been an overwhelming presentation by the House managers of the facts and the law, videotaped to back up everything that they've said, the president's own personal tweets. All of this information is there. The question now, when we look at the Senate Republicans, is whether they will be loyal to this president and vote against conviction, loyal to a president who turned a murderous mob on his own vice president in the closing hours of his that day, or whether they're afraid politically that if they vote against him in any way, shape, or form, they'll pay dearly for it at home. Unfortunately, those are the factors that have been at work in the Senate among the Republicans during the entire Trump presidency.
There's a group, as you know, that announced its intentions before this even began not to convict President Trump. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, that group. But what about Mitch McConnell? It's a man you've known for a long time, a man you've worked with. He has left open the possibility that he would vote to convict. Do you think he is taking seriously the process, and do you take seriously the idea that he, and perhaps bring some others along with him, might vote to convict former President Trump?
There was a moment when they presented the statements and the facts of those in the Trump administration who resigned because of January 6th prematurely before the end of Trump's presidency. And one of the photos, of course, was of Elaine Chao, who served as our Secretary of Transportation, the spouse of Senator McConnell. I'm sure that he saw that, and I'm sure he's thinking about that. I have no idea how he'll come down on this. She made it clear that she couldn't continue with this president after what happened on January 6th.
So, Senator, based on what Republicans have said over the past week or so, they're likely going to justify their votes against impeachment based on two arguments. One, procedural, this is an unconstitutional process. What say you to that argument?
I think Congressman Raskin addressed that directly. We voted on that procedural question. Joe, you've been in a courtroom. You know what happens. You file your early motions to dismiss whatever they happen to be. The court doesn't agree with you. You go on with the trial. And ultimately, a decision has to be made on the evidence. The procedural question was voted on 56 to 44. The Senate said that the fact that Donald Trump is not currently in office does not bar this impeachment proceeding. So I would hope that the Republican senators would acknowledge the obvious. They need to judge this case on the facts and the law and not hide behind some procedural opportunity that they missed.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.